Hello everyone, this is Vin. I'm here to tell you that Jake, when he was recording this video on OBS Studios, hit the record screen and forgot to actually look and check and see what was going on. So didn't see that for some reason OBS Studios clipped out the name of the tiers. So I'm going to tell you what they are so that you know for the rest of the video. So the top left tier is Stonks, representing series that I'm much higher on than when I originally read them. And then you have Perhaps I Treated You Too Harshly for series that I'm higher but not substantially higher on. And then you have the middle tier, and I forget what this dumb human called it, but it doesn't matter. You get the idea. And then below that was Perhaps I Didn't Treat You Harshly Enough, which is a series I'm slightly lower on. And then in the bottom is Not Stonks. So I then am having my human tell you this message so you know what happened and why you can't see the name of the tiers when watching the rest of the video. So enjoy the video, everyone. Also, please ignore the lack of books in the background. Also, if you just watched that first minute and are worried that I've gone insane, don't worry. You have to have been sane to go insane, so I can't go insane. Hello everyone, it is time for another tier list, and we have a series tier list. I have excluded the standalones because there were too many of them, and I'm doing a tier list not necessarily for how much I like these series. I thought it'd be kind of interesting to do a tier list on how my opinion of things have changed. So we have series that over time have gone stonks. We have series where I'm like slightly higher of them. We have series where it hasn't really changed much, series where I'm like a little harsher on, and series where I'm like, in hindsight, I am much harsher on than I originally thought I would. Now, I would note there's going to be some stuff in Stonks that I don't necessarily love. There'll probably be some stuff in this tier that like I like a lot. It's just my current opinion of the series is maybe slightly lower than when I originally read it, or vice versa. So let's get into it. These, I believe, are in alphabetical order. And what you're going to notice is that I couldn't spell the series name for A Memory Called Empire. Because if you look, all these others, the alphabetical order is actually based on the series name, I think. Wow, there's so many. No, that's not true, because Sun Eater's... It is alphabetical. I ditched the in the Sun Eater. So it was just Sun Eater and Lord of the Rings. Whatever. Up here, and Lord of the Rings is down here. What is going on? Whatever. A Memory Called Empire and Desolation Called Peace. I don't know how to pronounce the series name. Hasn't changed that much. Why are these the same color? I don't like that. And why is it always backwards? Like, green? No, you know what? Yeah, we're doing this live. Blue, green, yes, yellow, and then like orange, and then red. The stock is going down, not stonks. Okay. A Memory Called Empire. Thought it was pretty good. I still think it's pretty good. Moving on. Next up, we have A Song of Ice and Fire, and we are going to lead with stonks. This is one that I've had more time to change my opinion on, but I'm currently much higher than I used to be on A Song of Ice and Fire. And I was already reasonably high on A Song of Ice and Fire, but just... like, when I first read A Song of Ice and Fire, I had not read nearly as many books, and my appreciation for the story and characters and everything has certainly gone up over time. Book of the Ancestor, probably a somewhat similar position as A Memory Called Empire. Maybe slightly lower, because I'm just like... the thing is, I think it's good. I just struggled with the writing style. Like, I couldn't picture anything. I'd have to, like, reread sentences so much, because I don't think they were descriptively, like, intuitive. Anyway, Book of the New Sun. It's going to be a bell curve, by the way. Expect a bell curve. Book of the New Sun, I mean, I didn't treat it harshly. I really liked it, but I'm probably even slightly higher than when I first read Book of the New Sun, which I read a lot more recently than I read a lot of these. Like, some of these I read very recently, so there hasn't been that much time for the change. Some of them I read a long time ago. Chaos Walking trilogy, about the same. I'm still extremely high on book 1. I still think Knife of Never Letting Go is fantastic. And I kind of actually feel similar about all the books. Here we have an example of one where I love Codex Alera. Codex Alera was one of the first fantasy series I read. And it was like my favorite series when I read it. So it's kind of moved down by necessity. But it's still like in an actual tier list of quality would be near the top. I'll probably do that video at some point. It's weird that I haven't, considering it's actually like one of the first videos that got me into like not reading and reading new stuff was a Daniel Green series tier list, because I didn't know how to find new series to read. So I was just like, well, I agree with some of this person's stuff. Let's just take all the series he puts in S tier and read them. So I'll do it at some point. So Divergent, there's a bunch of like stuff I read here when I was quite young that probably a bunch of you didn't know I read. Divergent's one of them. It was one of the not amazing ones when I read it. It's not aged well. Allegiant might be legitimately the worst book I've ever read. It's one of, maybe the other day I was trying to it's actually because I was watching Chatting with Nuts, and I forgot the name of Jared. It was the one with Jared, and he got asked like to say something positive about the Kingkiller Chronicles, and he couldn't. And I'm like, wow, I don't think there's anything. And Jared's a super nice guy, but just doesn't like the Kingkiller Chronicles. And I was like, I don't think there's a single book that I couldn't come up with something nice to say about it. And then I was like, what would I say that's nice about Allegiant? Third book of the Divergent trilogy. Now, granted, it's been a long time since I read Allegiant. Probably if I reread it, I could find something that I thought was good. But then also I'd be able to be much more specific in the things I hated. Dune. I loved Dune when I first read it. Do I love Dune more now? Probably a tiny bit. Ender's Game I read a long time ago. And I kind of feel pretty similar about it. Like, I think it's good. I thought it was good at the time. I don't know if it's moved up. Gentlemen Bastards I'm definitely higher on. I think, just, again, this was somewhat earlier in getting back into reading new stuff, and I didn't appreciate how good his dialogue was. Especially, like, books 2 and 3. So I'm definitely higher on Gentlemen Bastards. And I'm actually, probably a lot of people were, like, Harry Potter fanatics when they were a kid. So now they're lower on Harry Potter. I was actually not as, like, super ultra enthusiastic of a fan of Harry Potter. I reread it in like 2019. As a kid, I liked Percy Jackson more. I definitely like Rick Riordan more, but I liked Percy Jackson more, and I reread both in like 2019, and I think Harry Potter held up better, so I'm actually gonna put Harry Potter up here. Golden Compass is one of the series that I have to continue. I've only read book 1. I feel pretty similarly that I did at the time, despite I feel like other people talk about the series like it's really brilliant, and I didn't find that. I thought it was good. I thought there was things in it that were really silly and kind of ridiculous. I thought there were things in it that were really good. I don't know, like, people... Sometimes I feel like people give it credit for being, like, good when it's a series written for children, but, like, I'm judging it on the scale of just... I don't know, I think it should be... I don't think it's uniquely amazing compared to books that are, like, written for adults. And I think sometimes, like, that's not... Other people would disagree with me. Other people would tell me that it's just incredible at any standard. I didn't find that. The way the bear conflict was resolved was completely ridiculous. But there were some really good scenes. And the writing was pretty good. Hyperion. Probably slightly higher on Fall of Hyperion. I like Fall of Hyperion quite a bit less than Hyperion still. But I might be slightly higher on Fall of Hyperion. And my book 1 I probably feel about the same, which is that I loved it when I read it, and I love it now. And it's pretty close to the same, though. I probably love it about the same amount. The Kingkiller Chronicles. This is another one that I read a long time ago. Probably I'm slightly harsher on it now, just because I have more things to compare it to, and just more things that I like more. Legend by Mary Lou. This is a YA series. And you're going to notice a lot of YA series on here. I'm like, in hindsight, was kind of ass. And this is proof of concept that I don't think that by default. And these other series that we'll get to were, in fact, kind of ass. Because this one, I'm like, no, that was solid. That was solid. Leviathan Wakes was like the first book I read this year. I should probably continue at some point. It's a solid 4 stars. Still a solid 4 stars. It's pretty good. It's good at everything. Didn't know if it. I would say it's incredible at anything. Lightbringer, not Stonks. So Lightbringer, I already didn't like book 4 when I read it. I've now liked book 4 less than when I read it. Like, I've gotten more and more angry at Lightbringer over time. And I've gotten less high on, like, when I read it, I was like, okay, but the first 3 books are, like, really excellent. And now I'm like, yeah, the first 3 books were like, they were good. Okay, they were good. And then so it's maybe the one that's dropped down the most. Hey, remember, like, 2 series ago when I was like, there's going to be a bunch of YA books on here that, in hindsight, I'm like, these were just not that good. Yeah, number 4 was just not. It's a good premise. It was just whatever. Mawlazin Book of the Fallen, complicated relationship with this series, which is that I really like it. It's like I know what my top 10 series is. At some point that video is going to exist. And it's in that video. At times I think it's maybe gone up. I like some individuals' books more maybe. But also, like, I've gotten more angry about it over time. Like, I've definitely rant about it. I'm talking to people more now, but maybe I'm more appreciative of its good stuff. We're going to put it in about the same. It could be up here, but I don't think I like it enough more. Memory, Sword, and Thorn. This series really disappointed me. I really like the Dragonbone chair. I just don't like it as much as a lot of people do. I just don't see in it what a lot of people see in it when... I mean, a lot of people think it's one of the best fantasy series that's ever been written. I don't know, the prose is good. It's just... Even I saw someone, like, tweeted a quote from it. And, like, I just find the rhythm of his prose weird. Like, if I try and say it out loud, I fumble over my words. Like, I sub-vocalize. And I fumble over the sub-vocalization. It's just, like, has a cadence to it that doesn't quite work with me. And I don't know. Like, I just didn't think... And I think the prose is what it was, like, the thing that is supposed to differentiate it. So I'm probably wonder if I'd read this in a vacuum and not heard people who I trust and say that, like, it's one of the best fantasy series, if I wouldn't have liked it less. Mistborn, similar vein as Codex Alera. This was the first, like, adult fantasy series that I read, and it was, like, my favorite thing ever. It was like, give me more of that. I just think compared to some of my favorite series, like, the character work I think is fine, and the plot, it's incredibly plotted. Like, I still love Mistborn more than most of the stuff on here, but I definitely am slightly harsher on it now. Percy Jackson and the Olympians, loved it as a kid. I still think it's a great middle grade to YA series and holds up quite well. I do think Harry Potter holds up better. I think that, but like, there's some things that I think I noticed reading it later. Like, everyone has the same sense of humor. That's more Hero of Olympus, though. But whatever. Ready Player One. This I actually found... The main thing I remember of this is this was the book I read directly before The Final Empire. And I had fun. This is one I'm scared to reread, because I'm fully expecting to just find a ton of stuff that's bad about it. So I would say probably not Stonks, because if I thought it higher of it, I wouldn't be scared to reread it. Realm of the Elderlings. I mean, when I finished Realm of the Elderlings, it was, like, my favorite series ever. It's still my favorite series ever. Farseer specifically I've gone up on. But, like, everything else, I'm just like, I thought this was the best thing ever. I still think it was the best thing ever. So, I mean, it didn't have a lot of room to move up. So, I guess about the same. Red Rising... Yeah, I mean, I like Red Rising. Book 1, I still don't like Darrow. I still think Darrow's really boring in book 1. Book 2 is maybe the fastest paced book I've ever read. It's a roller coaster. I think book 3 is by far the most well written, but just has a couple things that annoy me. That's kind of how I felt when I read it. Books of Babel, somewhat similar. Haven't actually, like, thought about it that much since I read it that much, but, like, it was enjoyable to read. Yeah, Books of Babel is about the same. Soldier Sun trilogy, I read it too recently, so it's in about the same. Sword of Truth, I've only read one of the books in here. I thought it was pretty bad when I read it. I still think it's really bad. The Fifth Wave, I was really young when I read this. This is when I was Googling like all these covers to get for this. Do you know how many YA series have an adaptation? I'm now in favor of calling Mistborn and Stormlight YA because it seems like every YA series gets an adaptation. If I start calling Stormlight YA, can we get an adaptation? Granted, most of those adaptations that I'd never heard of sucked. Yeah, hold that thought. But yeah, I mean, the Fifth Wave in hindsight is like pretty awful. It's just incredibly generic and just has not. I don't think it has that much of value to add. Sorry to the author of the Fifth Wave if they're watching this. The Band by Nicholas Ames, super fun series. Probably slightly lower on. I mean, I was pretty high on it, and now I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good. Black Company, I was pretty damn high on when I finished, and I think I'm even higher on now. Like Shadows Linger, especially the earlier ones, which there's quite a bit of time in between me starting the series and ending it. Books of Earthsea, I would say I'm higher on as well. I think reading The Dispossessed and more Le Guin, I think going back, I would appreciate it even more. Daughter of the Moon Goddess, I mean, I don't think it's good. I didn't think it was good when I read it. I would have DNF'd it if it wasn't for the book club. I don't think I've gotten more harsh with it. Unlike The Emperor's Blades, which I have gotten more harsh with. I actually, my opinion of this keeps going down. I don't know how so many, like, just errors got into this book. It's like a 500-page book that could have started on page 400. I'm even harsher on it, and I was harsh. It might even, like, it started pretty low, and it still might be not stonks. But I don't think it can be not stonks because it started not good. But it's definitely, perhaps I've treated you harshly. Cinder Spires, I just reread and gave the exact same rating. So, there you go. City of Brass, I haven't thought about. The Dandelion Dynasty. So, I mean, my opinion has gone up a lot since reading the first three books because of how good the fourth book was. Probably it's gotten even better in hindsight. I think it would be even higher. Darkest Minds is with Fifth Wave, generic YA series, very little ad, somehow had an adaptation I've never heard of. That adaptation is apparently trash. Master of Djinn, haven't thought about it since I read it. The Dresden Files. Now, I've read this for the first time a lot longer ago than all the other ones, but you know how some of these series, I'm like, yeah, you know, as I've read other stuff, I'm like, it moves down slightly. I keep reading new all-time favorite series, and then I sit on it, and I'm like, do I like this more than the Dresden Files? And the answer keeps being no for most of them. There's a couple exceptions. So I think my appreciation, like, for Jim Butcher as an author and, like, the character work has even gone up over time. Where, like, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, I think I would have told you Sanderson is the clearly better writer. And I would have told you, like, that Stormlight is, like, substantially better in terms of, like, quality. And I'd be like, you know, I still like Dresden a lot, but that Stormlight's better. Now I'm like, I still like Stormlight more. But, like, I think quality-wise, they are in the same tier. The Way of a Dan by Philip Chase. Only read one book. Haven't continued. But I think it's maybe gone... Like, it might be... Maybe it would just... No, it's about the same. Faithful and the Fallen. Still really like this series. Still think it's heaps of fun. I still enjoy whenever people say they don't like it, telling them they must be a fan of Lies and Cowardice. But if I'm being completely honest, I'm not as high on it as I was when I first read it, where the adrenaline was maybe pumping a little too high. The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I think I'm even higher on the first book, but then slightly lower on books 2 and 3, which averages out to about the same. The Fiona of Our Tapestry by Guy Gavriel Kay. I'm definitely harsher on. Like, I was really high on this series when I read it, but just, like, it just has some problems that are just clunky. And I don't know, like, I just don't think it stands up well compared to the rest of his work, which is an incredibly high bar. It's almost not stonks. It would be by far the best thing in not stonks, but it's also the thing I had the highest... No, I mean, I gave Lightbringer similar reviews to Fiona. Okay, we'll leave it in perhaps I have not treated you harshly enough. The first Law trilogy, really liked it when I first read it, still really like it. Knew it wasn't going to be an all-time favorite author when I first read it, still isn't an all-time favorite. Forgetting Moon, I need to read The Lonesome Crown. It's just, there's too many names, and I'm worried I'm going to have forgotten everything, and I haven't had time to reread it, and they're too thick. But it's a really good series, and I thought it was a really good series when I read it. I still do. The Founders by Robert Jackson Bennett. Yeah, Shorefall probably soured me on the first book a little bit, which kind of got carried by just being, like, page-turny and addictive and having a really cool magic system. But now looking back, I'm just like, bleh. Graceling, hey, random YA series that YA books that I read back in the day. Although probably in they're if I think about it, Graceling is probably distinctly better than Divergent, The Fifth Wave, and The Darkest Road. So, Trader's Blade, The Greatcoats. So I don't like this series. I don't like really at all. But I think I'm actually probably slightly higher on it. I still think some of the plotting is ridiculous. I still think some of the scenes are terrible. I still think some of the emotional moments in Book 2 were repetitive. I still think Book 2 still has an incredibly amount of ridiculous stuff. But I think the character work and friendships has aged pretty well. And having that clear good quality makes it very different from some of the other series that I didn't like at the time. So I still don't like it, but I probably am slightly less harsh on it now. And the action was really fun. And it was funny. Anyway, Greenbone Saga. I think I'm probably slightly higher on the Greenbone Saga since I read it. I mean, there's a ton of, like, modern fantasy trilogies that are, like, very good. But also I think, like, not the best thing I've ever read that came out in the last, like, I don't know, 10, 15 years. And I think, in hindsight, I'm like, this stands out as better than the rest of them, in my opinion. Heroes of Olympus, I think about the same. Blood of Olympus was disappointing. I'm still disappointed by it. House of Hades, I think, is the best Rick Riordan book I've read by far. House of Hades slaps. Mark of Athena slaps. Son of Neptune slaps. Yeah. Hunger Games. So, Hunger Games, I think, with Harry Potter, pretty clearly of, like, the books the series that were, like, huge in high school or elementary school that I read, I think this is, like, clearly better than the others. Like, I think Hunger Games is a lot better than Divergent. So I liked it at the time, so I don't know if it should be in about the same, or should it actually be higher? Do I want to put it higher just because, like, I'd expect it to have gotten worse and it hasn't? Oh, that being said, like, I'm thinking of the first two books, which I think held up very well. I don't like Mockingjay at all. Okay, we're going to put it in about the same, but that's because Mockingjay I've gotten harsher on, and actually, in hindsight, I'm more impressed with Hunger Games and Catching Fire relative to its peers. So the first two are here, and Mockingjay's here. So we're putting it there. Inheritance Cycle, whatever. Maybe I'll read more. No, this was another one of the ones that I read quite young, and I don't know. Breach of Peace, I thought it was pretty mid when I read it. I kind of agree with my review. Like, I don't think it's actively bad. Gideon the Ninth. So, I hated reading Gideon the Ninth. I just didn't find anything about it entertaining. I found a ton of its choices frustrating. I found, like, it was written like it wanted me to constantly be checking the glossary. I didn't like it at all. But I don't think it was a horribly written book. And I wonder if over time, like, I remember more that it wasn't horrible than I do just hating reading it. And I almost want to put it here. But, like, I still hated reading it. And I'm still leaving it at 1 star. And I think sometimes, like, I'm thinking about this deliberately now. But sometimes I forget, like, there were things about it I disliked that I thought were actually had to do with execution and not just not liking it. And I, like, in my head, I actually think it's better than it maybe is. And maybe I'm nicer at it now. Whatever. I think it's going here, even though I still like reading it less than nearly, not 100%, because, I mean, we've got Allegiant, Divergent on here, and Sword of Truth. But most of the things on here. Long Price Quartet, I've only read book 1. Book 1 was good. Still think book 1 was good. Lord of the Rings, stonks. Lord of the Rings is probably, like, most improved of anything here. Like, Lord of the Rings I read for the first time in 2020, and I didn't love it, but I was like, this is good. Then I read it again last year, and I loved it. And my opinion of it has even gone up since I read it last year. Like, even if I was comparing how I felt when I read it the second time and now, it would still be stonks, but it's in comparison to when I read it, like, the first time. Lord of the Rings is incredible. Mare of Thieves, I read this year. I don't think it's good. I didn't think it was good at the time of reading it. I would have rage DNF'd it at a certain part if it wasn't the book club book. Yeah, whatever. Maze Runner, whatever. I think it's better than these two, probably. Like, I can... At least this one, I'm like, I can remember this moment. That was kind of cool. This, like, the Fifth Wave, there was the exposition at first that was, like, describing how the aliens destroyed the Earth. I don't know why they wanted to do that. And it was, like, pretty ruthless, and I think was a pretty cool way of being like, this is how they destroyed the Earth. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But then nothing else. Darkest Road, I just don't know, whatever. So Murderbot, I've only read All Systems Red. At the time I read it, I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was a really fun protagonist, and everything else was mediocre. In hindsight, I'm like, it's kind of just... Like, I don't see what other people see in Murderbot. Granted, I've only read All Systems Red, but I think All Systems Red won some awards. I just think everything except Murderbot, the protagonist, is not just average, but, like, actively flat. And I just don't think Murderbot being funny is enough. So it's in hindsight, when I read it, I was intending on continuing, and now I'm like, nah, I don't feel like continuing. The Poppy War... Definitely gotten harsher on the Poppy War. I was pretty high on the Poppy War when I read it. Like, if you look at my review of the first Poppy War book, but I think just some of its cons of, like, the supporting cast were being a bit whack. It just stands out over time. And I'm just like, I don't know if I think it's as good as some of the stuff that I had a similar score. This one's going to hurt me. So, The Rage of Dragons and The Fires of Vengeance, I absolutely love them. I stayed up till 7 a.m. reading. I was so high on them when I first read them, it almost by default has to have trended down. But I still like Rage of Dragons more than, like, everything here. Yeah, I really like Cody Slayer, but still everything here. And, like, pretty much everything here except Realm of the Elder Rings. Just going through everything and being like, is that true? Yeah, that's pretty much true. And almost everything here as well. Yeah, yes. Not Dandelion. Yeah, I mean, I still absolutely love it, but it was so high to start, it had to come down. Reckoner's series is Sanderson's The Boys. Yeah, whatever. Just Calamity, the final book, I like, has not aged well. Serentine Mosaic. I ridiculously love the Serentine Mosaic, and still it's in between these two. Like, in hindsight, I think it's pretty clearly I think the best Guy Gavriel Kay book, in my opinion. I don't know if I can put it stonks, because, like, Lord of Emperors was already easily my book of the year. So it's like, how much higher on it can I be? But I reread it, and I was higher on both. Like, Lord of Emperors, I was like, wow, this is somehow even better. And Sailing to Sarantium, I think, was also... I can't put it that high, just because I was already so high on it. Shadow Campaigns... Yeah, whatever, it was pretty good. I haven't thought about it since. Shadow of the Gods. Yeah, I was pretty high on Shadow of the Gods. And I still think it's a fun series. I think I'm probably slightly lower on it. Stormlight was my absolute favorite thing ever for a long time. It's still one of my absolute favorite things ever. I love it as much as I did. There's other things I love as much now. It's about the same. Sun Eater... Similar boat. I like Sun Eater more than 90% of the things on this list. I don't think I've gotten, like, higher on Sun Eater in hindsight the way I have... Sorry, Rockyo, if you're watching this. When I first read Dandelion, I was like, it's pretty close between the Dandelion Dynasty and Sun Eater. In hindsight, I like the Dandelion Dynasty more than I like the Sun Eater. but I still really love the Sun Eater, so it's going in about the same. The Wheel of Time, I've gotten lower on. Wheel of Time, when I first read it, I was like, do I like this more than Stormlight? I do not like this more than Stormlight. I don't like this more than... and I thought I liked it... No, I don't like it more than Dresden. It was the first non-reread big series I'd read in a long time, and I was very forgiving of it, because it was the first new piece of media that I could really dive in, and there were things that I really loved about it. I was, like, very forgiving about entire, like, sections that I didn't enjoy. Like, I gave Crossroads of Twilight 3 stars. I think it would be lucky to escape with, like, 2 on reread right now. I didn't like... And a couple of them kind of dropped down a little bit on reread a little bit. I still love The Wheel of Time. Like, Wheel of Time, again, is still going to be in my top 10 fantasy series list. But it's not among the ones that are like, these are like my favorite things ever. The Witcher, not stonks. It's maybe gone down the most of any series where, like, I thought it was pretty good, and then it just keeps getting worse in hindsight, especially Lady of the Lake, like the last book. Now, The Witcher, I always say it's unfair for us to judge, because if you talk to people who read it in Polish, like, they talk about the writing in it the same way I talk about, like, Guy Gavriel Kay's writing. That did not come across in the translation. But, it's definitely a not stonks. Throne of Glass. What was I thinking? Reading 5 of those. World of Five Gods. I really liked it. I really like Curse of the Challeon. I still really like Curse of the Challeon. Okay, there you go. I haven't seen this before. I'd be curious to see other people do this. This is how things have aged for me over time. Basically, all the series that I have, like, actively started. Discworld, I decided, was standalones. Whatever. Discworld would be about the same. Maybe slightly higher. But yeah, this is the tier list. I'd be curious to see other people do this. I expect this is one where you will see very, very different results for various people. I think probably not a lot of people are going to have... So I think some people will have, like, very different tier lists than me, even if they've read similar series. So it would be interesting to see. And also, if you just skip to the end of the video to see the tier list and are getting mad at me, again, there's only a slight correlation between where they are and how good they think I are. Like, Realm of the Elderlings is in the middle tier because when I read it, it was my favorite thing ever. And it's still my favorite thing ever. And, like, Gideon, when I read it, I was like, I hated this. And I'm like, maybe I hate this slightly less. So, this is all relative to how I started at first. So, if you're skipping at the head, don't get mad at me just based on where something was. Something is. That's just how it's aged over time. That being said, to be not stonks, I kind of have to think it's either mediocre or actively dislike it. And, like, unless something went from how much I like Realm of the Elderlings now to being like, that's a solid 4-star series, I guess that would be not stonks, but that seems like it's unlikely to happen. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the tier list. Just brought up OBS in the middle of the outro. Whatever. Peek behind the curtain. Bye, everyone.